There is a kind of calm that most people never reach, and it has nothing to do with pretending you are not affected. The calm you were sold as a child was a lie. You were told to smile when you were angry, to stay quiet when you were hurt, to keep the peace by swallowing your own voice. That is not calm. That is suppression wearing calm's clothing. And the difference between the two will shape whether you spend the rest of your life reacting to people who never earned that much of you. Here is what almost nobody understands. The person who cannot be reached is not the person who feels nothing. It is the person who feels everything and is no longer moved by the wrong hands. There is a stillness available to you that does not depend on the room going quiet. It does not depend on anyone behaving. It does not depend on the phone staying silent or the family staying kind or the world becoming fair. It lives inside you, and once it is built, it cannot be taken by someone who did not build it. Think about how strange that is. Everything else you own can be taken. Money can be taken. Health thins with the years. The people you love can leave, by choice or by time. But a calm that you have built from the inside belongs to you in a way that nothing else does, because it does not sit in a bank or a body or another person's willingness. It sits in you, in the part of you no one can enter without your permission. And most people never build it because no one ever told them it could be built. They were told it either falls on you like luck or it does not, and so they waited for luck, and luck did not come. Notice how much of a life can pass in that waiting. You wait to feel steady until the household is easier. You wait until the money is less tight, until the health scare has passed, until the difficult person softens or leaves or dies. You treat calm as a reward the world owes you for good behavior, a thing that will be handed over once you have suffered enough, or served enough, or waited long enough. And the world does not hand it over, because the world was never in charge of it. That is the first thing to set down. No one is coming to make you calm. It was always your own work. And the good news buried in that hard sentence is that your own work is the one thing no one can cancel. You will learn 3 things here. You will learn what real calm is, so you stop chasing the counterfeit. You will learn the 3 signs that reveal you are still reachable, still hooked, still handing your peace to people who have shown you exactly who they are. And you will learn what to do instead, in language plain enough to carry into your kitchen tomorrow morning. Not theory, not something for a monastery, something for the ordinary rooms of an ordinary life, where most of the wounding happens and most of the healing has to happen too. Most people believe calm is something that happens to you when life finally cooperates. They think, when the money settles, I will be calm. When he changes, I will be calm. When the children finally understand what I gave up for them, I will be calm. So they wait. They wait for decades. They arrange their whole inner life around a condition that never arrives. And they call the waiting patience when it is really just a slow surrender of their own peace to circumstances that were never going to hand it back. The truth is the reverse. Calm is not what happens when the world stops testing you. Calm is what remains when the world does its worst and finds nothing loose to shake. Sit with that. Nothing loose to shake. You have met people like this. You may have envied them without knowing what you were envying. Someone raises their voice and the person does not flinch. Someone says a cruel thing designed to land, and it simply does not land. There is no satisfying reaction to feed on. No wound to press, no flush of the face, no rush to defend. The cruelty arrives, touches nothing, and falls to the floor. And the one who threw it is left standing there, holding an empty hand, more unsettled than the person they meant to unsettle. That is not coldness. That is not indifference to life. It is composure that took years to earn, and it is available to you. And here is a thing worth naming early. The people who have this calm did not get it because life was gentle with them. Almost always the opposite is true. The ones who cannot be reached are usually the ones who were reached too many times, too deeply, for too long, and finally learned. Their stillness is not innocence. It is what grew in the place where the flinching used to be. So if you feel that you have been through too much to ever be at peace, understand that you have it backwards. What you have been through is not the obstacle to this calm. It is the raw material of it. Consider that for a moment, because it changes how you look at your own history. Every time you are hurt and survived it, you are handed a small piece of proof that hurt is survivable. Every betrayal you lived through told you, quietly, that betrayal does not end you. You may have read all of that as damage. It was also instruction. The person who has never been reached has never been tested. An untested calm is only a guess. Your calm, if you build it now, will be the tested kind. And the tested kind is the only kind that holds when it matters. Understand why this matters more now than it ever has. For most of your life you have been reachable, and everyone around you learned it. They learned which words made you defend yourself. They learned which silences made you fill them. They learned the exact face you make when you are hurt but trying not to show it, and some of them learned to enjoy putting that face on you. This is not paranoia. This is the plain arithmetic of being a person who cared. You cared, and caring left doors open, and people walked through the doors you left open. There is no shame in that. A person who never leaves a door open, never lets anyone in, and a life like that has its own poverty. The point was never to become a locked house. The point is to learn who you are opening the door to, and to stop treating every knock as a command to open. Discernment is the word for this. And it is not suspicion. It is simply seeing clearly. You look at who is standing in front of you before you decide how much of yourself to spend. The way a careful person looks at the weather before deciding what to wear. That is not cynicism. That is a person who has finally decided to pay attention to what has been in front of them all along. Now something in you has grown tired. Not tired of caring, tired of being reachable by people who bring you nothing but the bill. And that tiredness is not the beginning of bitterness. It is the beginning of discernment, which is the ability to see clearly who is standing in front of you before you decide how much of yourself to spend. Bitterness closes the heart against everyone. Discernment closes it only against the ones who have proven again and again that they came to take. There is all the difference in the world between those two, and much of your remaining peace depends on knowing which one you are building. The reason calm is real, and not some spiritual decoration, is that people calibrate their treatment of you to the reaction they expect to get. This is one of the oldest truths about human beings, and no one teaches it to you directly. So you have to learn it the long way, through years of being pushed. A person does not push a wall. A person pushes a door they believe will swing. When you are reachable, you are a swinging door. When you become still, you become a wall, and the pushing simply stops because there is no longer any point to it. Watch this happen and you will never unsee it. The relative who needled you for years grows quiet when the needling stops working. The neighbor who thrived on your flustered replies loses interest when the flustering ends. The old friend who kept you in the smaller seat suddenly has less to say when you stop shrinking to fit it. None of them announce that they have changed their behavior. They simply drift toward easier targets because contempt needs a reaction the way fire needs air, and you have stopped feeding it air. Notice what this reveals about how people were treating you all along. It was never really about you. It was about the reaction you gave. The same words thrown at a person who does not react produce nothing, so the words stop coming. This means the treatment you received for years was in part something you were unknowingly supplying the fuel for. That is not a scolding. You did not know. Nobody told you. But once you do know it, a strange and steady power comes into your hands, because the one variable you can always control is the reaction, and the reaction is the whole engine. This is why you cannot argue your way to peace. You cannot explain yourself calm. Explaining is the swinging door in its purest form. Every time you explain yourself to someone committed to misreading you, you confirm that they still have the power to summon your defense, and that power is the only thing they were after. The explaining is the prize. Withhold it and the game ends, not because you won an argument, but because you refuse to play one. Consider how much of your life has gone into explaining, the long messages composed and revised, the conversations you sat through, trying to make yourself understood to someone whose face had already decided against you, the energy you spent trying to be seen correctly by eyes that had chosen not to see. All of it felt necessary in the moment, felt like the only decent thing to do, felt like the effort a good person makes. And almost none of it changed a single mind, because a mind that misreads you on purpose is not waiting for better information. It is defended against the information on purpose. Your explanations were rain on a roof built to keep them out. There's a great relief waiting in this, and most people never taste it because they die still explaining, still justifying, still trying to be understood by the one person who has decided, for reasons of their own, never to understand them. You do not owe your understanding to someone who traffics in your confusion. You can let them be wrong about you. Let that sentence land. You can let them be wrong about you and go on living, unbothered by a verdict you did not sign. The calm you are building rests on a single unshakable foundation, and it is this: your worth is not up for a vote. It was not up for a vote when you were young and eager to be chosen, and it is not up for a vote now. The people who treated you as though it were up for a vote were mistaken, and their mistake was never your emergency to fix. When you finally stop submitting your worth for approval, the whole machinery of reachability loses its fuel, because it ran on your belief that someone else's opinion could lower you. It cannot. It never could. This is the part that takes the longest to feel, because you were trained the other way from the beginning. You were rewarded for being approved of and punished for being disapproved of, so young that the training feels like your own nature, but it is not your nature. It is a habit worn deep, and habits worn deep can still be worn away. Every time you catch yourself reaching for someone's approval to feel steady, and you set the reaching down and stand on your own 2 feet without it, you wear the old habit a little thinner. Do it enough times and one day you will notice that a person's disapproval reached you and left, and you did not chase after it, and you did not fall. That day is closer than you think. There is a quiet dignity in a worth that no longer asks permission to exist. You have watched people who carry it. They do not perform. They do not audition. They walk into a room without scanning it for approval, and they leave it without wondering how they were received. This is not arrogance, which is loud and needs an audience. It is self-respect, which is quiet and needs no one. The difference is that arrogance is still asking to be measured, only asking louder, while self-respect has stopped submitting itself for measurement altogether. Aim for the second. It is the only one that rests. But there is something almost nobody sees here, and it is worth saying slowly. You cannot become unreachable while you still need something from the people who reach you. Need is the wire the current travels down. As long as you need his approval, his mood governs your day. As long as you need her to admit she was wrong, her silence keeps you hostage. As long as you need the family to finally see you clearly, their blindness runs your inner life. Detachment is not the absence of love. Detachment is the removal of the wire. You can love someone and no longer need their verdict to stand upright. That is the whole art of it, and everything else follows from it. Detachment is a word that frightens good people, because it sounds like giving up, like going cold, like ceasing to care. It is none of those. Think of it this way. There is a difference between wanting something and needing it. You can want your child to call and be glad when they do, and be a little sad when they do not, and still have a full and steady day either way. That is wanting. Needing is different. Needing means the day cannot proceed until the call comes, means you sit by the phone unable to live, means your peace is being held hostage by another person's choice. Detachment moves you from needing back to wanting. You keep the love. You keep the wish. You give up the hostage arrangement. And your life, which you had handed over piece by piece, quietly returns to you. Watch how the wire works in an ordinary week. Someone you care for is short with you on a Tuesday, and the wire carries the current straight into your chest, and you spend Wednesday trying to fix a mood that was never yours to fix. Someone withholds a word of thanks you were counting on, and the wire pulls, and you find yourself doing more, giving more, hoping the thanks will finally come and settle the ache. The wire is always the same. It is the belief that your steadiness must come from out there, from them, from their behavior, from their approval. Cut the wire and the current has nowhere to go. Their mood stays with them. Their silence stays with them. And you stay with you, which is where you belong the whole time. Now to the signs. There are 3 ways you can tell you are still reachable. Still handing your piece across the table to people who never set a place for yours. Each one is quiet. Each one hides inside behavior you think of as normal, even virtuous. And each one can be undone. The first sign that you are still reachable is that you rehearse conversations that have not happened yet. You know this rehearsal. You are washing a dish and suddenly you are 3 sentences deep into an argument with someone who is not in the room. You are lying awake and you are constructing the perfect reply to the thing they said last Tuesday, or last year, or in a decade that is over. You build the case. You anticipate their counter. You sharpen your line. And by the time morning comes, you are more tired than when you lay down, because you spent the night defending yourself to a phantom in a trial that has no judge. Why does this happen? It happens because some part of you still believes that if you could only find the right words, you would finally be seen correctly and the pain would resolve. That belief is the hook. It keeps you tethered to people who never intended to see you correctly, because being seen incorrectly is not a puzzle to be solved with better phrasing. It is a choice someone made. And no sentence you assemble at 2 a.m. is going to unmake it. There is another reason the rehearsal grips you, and it is worth knowing. The rehearsal gives you the feeling of control over something that has always been out of your control. In the imagined conversation, you win. You always win, because you write both sides. The other person finally understands, finally softens, finally admits what they did. It feels good for the length of the daydream, and that small good feeling is exactly why the mind returns to it, again and again, the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth. But the relief is counterfeit. Nothing has changed in the real world. You have only rehearsed a victory that will never be granted, and the rehearsing itself is the injury, repeated nightly by your own hand. Consider the person who spends 15 years perfecting the speech they will give when their mother finally apologizes. They polish it. They add to it. They imagine the exact softening of the mother's face when the truth is at last laid plainly before her, and the apology never comes because it was never going to come, and the speech dies in the mouth of a person who spent a decade and a half living inside a conversation that reality declined to hold. All that rehearsal was not preparation. It was captivity. The mother did not even know the trial was in session. Consider another, closer to home for many. The one who replays a single sentence a grown child said in anger years ago, and turns it over every quiet evening, drafting the reply that would make the child see what that sentence cost. The child has forgotten the sentence entirely. It meant nothing to them. A flash of temper long gone. But it built a permanent room in the parent's mind, and the parent has been living in that room for years, furnishing it, arguing in it, growing old in it, while the person who built it never once came to visit. Consider a third, quieter still, the one who lies awake composing the message they will never send, the long and careful account of every wrong, arranged in order, sharpened to a point, so that the person who wronged them will at last have no way to wriggle free. Morning comes and the message is not sent, because sending it would only reopen the whole exhausting exchange. So it sits in the mind, rewritten the next night and the next, a letter with no recipient, sealing the writer more tightly into the very grievance they meant to be free of. The rehearsal always promises release, and always delivers the opposite. It is a room with the door painted on the wall. What do you do with this? You catch the rehearsal in the act, and you set it down the way you would set down a bag that has grown too heavy. You do not scold yourself for picking it up. You simply notice your hands are full of an argument with a ghost, and you open your hands. Say it plainly, even out loud if the house is empty. This conversation is not happening. I release it. Then return to the dish, the walk, the breath, the actual life in front of you. The first few times this will feel like giving up ground. It is not. It is reclaiming the hours the phantom was stealing. Every rehearsal you refuse is a return to your own presence, and presence is where all your quiet strength has been waiting the whole time. It helps to give the mind something real to hold in the space the rehearsal used to fill. When you set the argument down, do not leave the hands empty, because empty hands reach for the old bag again. Fill them with the actual thing in front of you, the warmth of the water on the dish, the sound of your own footsteps on the walk, the weight of the cup, the light in the window, the ordinary and undramatic present that the phantom had been crowding out. The rehearsal lives in the past and the imagined future. Your piece lives only here, in the plain, unremarkable now, and the now is the one place the phantom cannot follow you. Do not expect the rehearsal to stop after one refusal. It will return, perhaps within the hour, and you will set it down again, and it will return again. This is not failure. This is the shape of the work. A path worn deep over decades is not erased in a day. But each time you refuse to walk it, the path grows fainter, and one evening you will find the argument did not start at all. And the quiet of that evening will belong entirely to you, and you will understand what you have been building. The second sign that you are still reachable is that other people's moods rearrange your day. Watch how the whole weather of your afternoon shifts because someone answered the phone in a flat voice. Watch how a curt reply lands, and suddenly you are searching backward through everything you said, hunting for the offense, the misstep, the thing you must have done. Someone walks into the room heavy, and the room becomes heavy for you too. Someone withdraws their warmth, and you find yourself working to earn it back, doubling your kindness, softening your voice, making yourself smaller and sweeter until the warmth returns, at which point you exhale as though a storm has passed. This is one of the most exhausting ways to live, and it masquerades as sensitivity, as care, as being a good and attuned person. But look closer. You are not attuned to them. You are governed by them. Their inner weather has become your inner weather. And you did not consent to that. It just happened, one adjustment at a time, over so many years that you stopped noticing you were adjusting. Here is why it happens. Somewhere far back, you learned that another person's bad mood was a danger to be managed, and you became very good at managing it. Perhaps their displeasure once cost you something real, and your nervous system filed it away as a threat. So now, decades later, a slammed cupboard door still puts you on alert, still sends you scanning, still recruits your peace into someone else's storm. The reaction is old, and the danger is mostly gone, but the wire is still connected. And notice the strange injustice built into this arrangement. The other person gets to have their bad mood freely, without guarding it, without managing it, letting it fill the room like smoke. And you, who did nothing, become responsible for clearing the air. You did not create the storm, and you cannot end it, yet you have appointed yourself its keeper, working and working to calm a weather that was never yours. Meanwhile, the one who made the weather feels no such duty toward yours. When you are heavy, does the whole house rearrange itself around your heaviness? Rarely. The reachable person clears everyone's air and is left to sit in their own alone. Think of the person who cannot begin their own morning until they have read the mood of the house. They wake and, before their feet touch the floor, they are listening. Is he up? What kind of up? Which version of him came down the stairs today? And the entire shape of their day bends around the answer. Their joy is provisional. Their peace is on loan. And the lender can call it in at any hour, without warning, for no reason they will ever be told. Think, too, of the person who checks the phone first thing and finds a short reply, or no reply, and feels the whole day tilt. There was no cruelty in the short reply. The other person was simply busy, or tired, or thinking of nothing at all. But the reachable person fills the silence with meaning, always the worst meaning, and carries that invented meaning through the hours like a stone in the shoe, until an ordinary evening message dissolves it, and they realize there was never anything there to carry. A day spent under the weight of a weather that did not exist. This happens more than anyone admits. Think of one more, because this one is so common it hardly gets noticed. The person who softens every plan around another's temper. They do not suggest the outing because he seemed tired. They do not raise the subject because she seemed tense. They shrink their own wishes down to fit the emotional room they have read, and they do it so automatically that they no longer feel it as a sacrifice. Their whole life narrows, one quiet accommodation at a time, until they can barely say what they themselves want, because they have spent so many years wanting only what the mood of the house would permit. That narrowing is the slow cost of being governed by moods that are not yours. What do? You begin to treat other people's moods as information, not instruction. Someone is short with you. That is information about their day. It is not an instruction to abandon yours. Someone withdraws their warmth. That is information about where they are standing. It is not an instruction for you to chase them across the room. You let their mood be theirs. You do not absorb it. You do not fix it. You do not make yourself the cure for a weather system you did not create. This is the practice of restraint. And restraint here does not mean coldness. It means you keep your own footing while someone else loses theirs. The most steadying thing you can offer a person in a bad mood is your own unbothered calm, and you cannot offer it if you have already been swept into their storm. There is a simple sentence that helps, and you can carry it in your pocket like a stone smoothed by use. That is theirs, not mine. When the flat voice lands, that is theirs, not mine. When the room goes heavy, that is theirs, not mine. It sounds too small to work, and that is exactly why it works, because it is small enough to reach for in the half second before the old scramble begins. It draws a quiet line between their weather and your ground, and standing on your own ground while another person's storm passes over is the whole practice, reduced to 4 words you already know. Practice this with the smallest moods first. A curt cashier, a neighbor who does not wave back, a short answer from someone you love. Let each one be a small training ground where you notice the pull to scramble and you decline it. Say quietly to yourself, that is theirs, not mine. 2 words, that is theirs. Then keep your own footing and go on. The small ones teach the muscle that the large ones will one day need, and the large ones always come. The third thing people miss is that they mistake being reachable for being loving. This is the subtle one, and it keeps good people trapped the longest. You have been taught that if you truly love someone, then their words should be able to reach you, wound you, move you, alter you. You have been taught that a person who cannot be hurt by their family does not love their family. So you left the doors open in the name of love, and you called your reachability devotion, and you felt that any move toward composure would be a move away from the people you cared about. Untangle these, because they are not the same thing at all. Love is a decision to want someone's good. Reachability is a wound that lets anyone's aim land. You can love a person entirely and still not permit their cruelty to govern your Tuesday. In fact, you love them better from a place of stability than from a place of constant injury, because an injured person cannot give steadily. They give in bursts, then withdraw to nurse the latest cut, then return, then get cut again. There is no reliable warmth in that. The person who has built their calm can love without flinching, and that is a rarer and more valuable gift than the raw open wound you were told to call devotion. There is a lie folded inside the confusion, and it is worth pulling out into the light. The lie says that your suffering is proof of your love, that the more a person can hurt you, the more it shows how much you care. Many good people have organized their whole hearts around this lie. They measure their devotion by their bruises, but look at it plainly and it falls apart. Your suffering is not a gift to anyone. It does not feed the person who caused it. It does not repair the relationship. It only drains the one doing the suffering. And a drained person has less love to give, not more. The bruise is not the love. The bruise is the tax, the reachable pay, and it buys nothing. There is a second lie stacked on the first, and it is quieter but no less costly. The lie says that if you stop being reachable, you will lose the person, that your open wound is the only thing keeping them close. So you keep the wound open, believing it is the price of the connection. But look at what such a connection actually is. It is a bond held together by your willingness to be hurt, which means it is not a bond at all, only an arrangement in which one person is fed by the injury of the other. A tie that requires your suffering to survive was never worth surviving. When you close the wound, whatever leaves was only ever attached to the bleeding, and whatever stays was there for you all along. Watch what happens to the one who never learns this. They give, and every ingratitude lands like a blade, and they bleed, and they give again, and they call the bleeding proof of their love. And the people around them learn that this person can be reached at will, that a sharp word will always produce the flinch, that withdrawal will always produce the chase. So the sharp words continue, not because those people are monsters, but because the door keeps swinging, and human beings, being human, keep walking through open doors. What do you do with this one? You separate your care from your reachability, deliberately, on purpose, and you keep the first while retiring the second. You decide that your love for someone is not measured by how much damage you allow them to do. You can hold someone in genuine affection and still say, quietly and to yourself, that will not reach me anymore. The love stays. The wound closes. And what remains is a warmth that no longer requires bleeding to prove it is real. This is the graceful version of caring, the version with boundaries, the version that can last a lifetime because it is not draining you dry to fund it. And here is what almost nobody expects. When you retire your reachability, the people who truly loved you do not leave. They breathe easier, because they were never after your suffering in the first place, and a steadier you is a gift to them too. The only ones who leave are the ones who came for the reaction, the ones who fed on the flinch. Their leaving is not a loss. It is the clarifying that shows you, at last, who was there for you and who was there for what they could pull out of you. So you know the signs. Now the work of building the calm itself, and this comes in 3 plain movements you can begin today. In your own house, with your own hands. The first movement is the practice of the pause. Between the thing that happens and your response to it, there is a space. For most of your life, that space has been almost nothing, a fraction of a second, so small you did not know it existed. Something lands, and you react, and the reaction feels like it was the only thing that could have happened. But the space is real, and it can be widened, and everything you want lives inside the widening. Begin small. The next time someone says something meant to provoke you, do nothing for the length of 1 breath. That is all. 1 breath. Do not answer. Do not defend. Do not arrange your face. Do not rush to fill the silence. Just breathe once, all the way in and all the way out, and let the provocation sit in the air unanswered for that single breath. You will feel the pull to respond, and it will be strong, because you have obeyed that pull for decades. Do not obey it. Let the breath finish first. In that 1 breath, something extraordinary becomes available. You get to choose. For the first time, you are not a swinging door. You are a person deciding whether to swing. You may decide the thing deserves no answer at all, and your silence will say more than any answer could. You may decide it deserves a short, level reply with no heat in it. You may decide to simply change the subject, or to leave the room, or to let the whole moment pass by like weather. But whatever you choose, you chose it, and the choosing is the entire difference between a person who reacts and a person who cannot be reached. The pause does something inside your own body as well, and this matters more than it may seem. When a provocation lands and you react instantly, your body has already flooded with the old alarm before your mind ever caught up. The pause interrupts that flood at the very start. 1 slow breath tells the oldest part of you that there is no lion in the room, only a person being difficult. And the difference between a lion and a difficult person is the whole difference between a life ruled by alarm and a life ruled by choice. Learn to give your body that one breath, and you will be astonished how often the alarm was the only real enemy in the room. As the pause becomes familiar, you can lengthen it, and lengthening it is a quiet luxury. A single breath becomes two. A moment becomes an evening. You learn that you do not have to answer a message the instant it arrives, that a question does not require an immediate reply, that a provocation can be left to sit for a day and will usually have shrunk to nothing by the time you return to it. Most of what feels urgent is not urgent at all. It only borrows urgency from your habit of instant response. Take back the time between the thing and your answer, and you will find that half of what once demanded a reaction no longer requires one, because you were the only one keeping it alive. Silence belongs here, and it deserves a moment of its own, because silence is the most misunderstood tool you own. You were taught that silence is weakness, that if you do not answer, you have lost, that the last word is the winning word. None of that is true. Silence is not the absence of a reply. Silence is a reply, and often the most powerful one available, because it withholds the reaction the other person was fishing for and leaves them with only their own words echoing back at them. A cruel remark, met with a calm and unbothered silence, curdles in the air. The person who made it hears it a second time in the quiet you refuse to fill, and it sounds uglier to them than it did coming out. You did not have to say a word. You let the silence do what argument never could. Understand the two kinds of silence, because they are not the same, and one is a fortress while the other is a wound. There is the silence of a person who is seething, biting their tongue, full of unspoken words, silent only because they are afraid to speak, and everyone in the room can feel the pressure of it. That is not the silence of calm. That is a scream held behind the teeth. Then there is the silence of a person who simply has nothing to prove, no reaction rising, no words wanting out, at genuine ease with letting the moment stand as it is. That second silence is unmistakable, and it is disarming, because it cannot be provoked into speech. Aim for the second silence. It comes only when the need underneath has already been set down, which is why all the earlier work matters. The second movement is the practice of the retreat. There is a lie at the center of many exhausted lives, and the lie says that walking away is losing. So people stay in rooms they should have left, in conversations that were over an hour ago, in relationships that emptied out a decade back, because leaving feels like defeat, and they were raised to endure. Endurance is a great strength, but endurance pointed at the wrong thing becomes a slow ruin. You do not get a prize for enduring what you were free to walk away from. Learn the difference between the retreat that is running and the retreat that is choosing. Running is what you do when you are overwhelmed and you flee to escape a feeling. Choosing is what you do when you calmly recognize that your presence is being wasted or abused, and you remove it. Not in anger, not with a slammed door, but with the quiet certainty of someone who has better places to spend their life. Walk away is not a threat you make. It is simply a thing you do, without announcement, when a situation has shown you it does not deserve your presence. Practice the small retreats so the large ones become possible. Leave a conversation that is turned into a place where you are being diminished, and leave it without a speech about why you are leaving. You do not owe a farewell address. Excuse yourself. Rise. Go. Let the incompleteness sit with them. You will feel, at first, the itch to explain your departure, to make it acceptable, to soften it so no one is offended. Resist that itch. The explanation is the swinging door again. A person who has learned to protect their peace does not file a report every time they choose to preserve it. There is an inner retreat as well, and you can perform it without moving a muscle in a room you cannot physically leave. Sometimes you are seated at a table you cannot rise from, at a gathering, in a car, in a place where leaving would cost more than staying. In those moments, you retreat inward. You stop offering yourself to the conversation. You let the words wash past you like traffic outside a window. You are present in body and gone in the way that matters, no longer available to be pulled into the argument, no longer supplying the reaction. This inner retreat is a skill, and it keeps your calm intact even when your feet are pinned. Learn it, and no room can ever fully trap you again. The inner retreat has a posture that goes with it, and the posture helps the mind follow. You sit a little straighter. You slow your breathing without anyone noticing. You let your face grow easy rather than tight, because a tight face is a face still fighting, and you are no longer fighting. From that quiet posture you observe the room the way you might watch weather through a window, interested perhaps, but not caught in it, not soaked by it, dry behind the glass. This is composure held in the body, and the body teaches the mind as often as the mind teaches the body. Sit like a person who cannot be reached, and you will begin to feel like one. And there is a larger retreat that many of you are circling without naming. The retreat into solitude. You have spent decades being needed, and being needed became the shape of your worth. And now that some of the needing has fallen away, you feel the strange ache of a house grown quiet. Do not rush to fill it. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is the absence of connection you wish you had. Solitude is the presence of yourself, finally uninterrupted, and it has gifts to return to you that a crowded life kept hidden. In the stillness you begin to hear your own preferences again, your own thoughts unshaped by whoever is in the room, your own life as it is when no one is asking anything of it. The person who fears solitude will accept any company to avoid it, and any company includes bad company. The person at ease in their own solitude becomes impossible to bargain with, because they are no longer desperate for the table. That ease is a fortress. Build it. Begin the friendship with your own solitude gently, in small pieces, so it does not frighten you all at once. Take 1 hour that belongs to no one. Sit in it without the television, without the phone, without a task to justify the time. At first it will feel like something is wrong, because you were trained to feel useful only when serving someone, and here you are serving no one. Sit through that discomfort. It passes. On the other side of it is a quiet you have not felt since you were very young, before the world filled your hours with other people's needs. Meet yourself there, a little at a time, and the strange ache of the quiet house slowly turns into the deep ease of a house that is finally, entirely yours. Notice what solitude returns to you once you stop mistaking it for punishment. It returns your own opinions, the ones you buried so long ago you had forgotten you held them. It returns the small preferences, the way you like your morning, the things you enjoy that no one asked you to enjoy. It returns a clarity about the people in your life, because distance shows you plainly who you actually miss and who you were only trained to worry about. Solitude is not empty. It is where the pieces of you that were loaned out for decades quietly find their way back home. The person who has made peace with their own company has struck a bargain with the one companion who will never leave. And that peace shows in everything, in the carriage, in the voice, in the unhurried way they move through a world that used to rush them. The third movement is the practice of standards held in silence. A standard you announce is a rule you are asking others to enforce. A standard you simply live is a wall no one can argue with. Stop telling people how you expect to be treated. Telling them hands them the power to debate it, to negotiate it down, to ask why, to make you justify the shape of your own dignity. Instead, decide privately what you will and will not accept, and then let your behavior enforce it without a single announcement. This is how it looks in practice. You do not tell the person who speaks to you with contempt that you will not tolerate contempt. You simply become less available to them quietly over time, and you let them notice the cooling without a lecture to protest against. You do not warn the one who takes and never gives that the giving is about to stop. You simply stop, and you let the absence teach what your words never could. Standards enforced by behavior cannot be argued with, because there is no argument, only a slowly dawning recognition in the other person that the terms have changed and they were not consulted, because the terms of your own dignity were never theirs to set. Understand why the announcement fails so reliably, because you have probably tried it many times. When you announce a boundary, you convert your dignity into a request, and a request can be denied, negotiated, mocked, or simply ignored. You have handed the other person a vote on something that was never theirs to vote on. Worse, the announcement often becomes its own drama, a new thing to argue about, and the argument itself is the reaction the difficult person wanted all along. But behavior offers nothing to argue with. There is no sentence to dispute in a phone that is answered later and later. There is no speech to counter in an invitation quietly not extended. Behavior speaks in a language that cannot be talked out of its meaning, and that is exactly why it works where words never did. Decide your standards in the quiet of your own mind, where no one can water them down. Write them for yourself if it helps, not for anyone to read. What will you no longer sit through? What tone will you no longer answer? What will you stop paying for with your time and your peace? Make them few and make them clear, and then carry them not as announcements, but as the simple, unstated facts of how you move through the world. A person with clear inner standards has a certain carriage about them, an unmistakable steadiness in how they stand and speak and decline. And others read that carriage long before any words are exchanged. That carriage is dignity, demonstrated and never announced, and it does more to protect your peace than 1,000 explained boundaries ever could. Expect a test, because a test always comes. When you first begin to live a standard instead of announcing it, the people accustomed to the old you will push harder for a while, not less. This is not a sign that the standard is failing. It is a sign that it is working, that the old pattern is meeting resistance for the first time and is straining to reassert itself. A door that always swung does not stop swinging the moment it becomes a wall. It is pushed harder, tested, leaned on, to see whether the wall is real. Hold steady through that testing without a word, and the pushing will pass, because a wall that does not move eventually stops being pushed. The test is the last gasp of the old arrangement, not the return of it. Hold this together and you will see it forms a single shape. The pause gives you the space to choose. The retreat gives you the freedom to leave what does not deserve you. The standards, held in silence, teach the world how to meet you without your ever having to say a word. And underneath all three runs the same current, the same quiet refusal to hand your peace to anyone who has not earned it. That refusal is not hardness. It is the softest, safest thing you will ever do for yourself. Now understand what is at stake, because the cost of never building this is not dramatic and it is not sudden. It is quiet and it is slow, and it takes the shape of a life. There was a person who spent 40 years being reachable, kind to a fault, quick to forgive, always the one who smoothed the room, always the one who apologized first, even when the fault was not hers, always the one who explained herself, patiently, endlessly, to people who had decided long ago never to understand her. She thought this was goodness. In many ways it was. But she left every door open, and the years walked through, and each one took a little of her with it. She rehearsed conversations that never happened. She lay awake building the perfect words to make her brother finally see how he had wronged her, and she delivered those words to the ceiling for 30 years, and her brother slept fine the whole time, unaware there was a trial. She let every mood in her house become her own, so that she never had a single day that belonged wholly to her, because the day always belonged first to whoever woke up unhappy. And she called all of this love, and she was proud of it, and it was slowly draining her of the one life she was given. The betrayals came, as they always do, to the reachable, because reachability is an invitation the careless cannot resist. Small betrayals, mostly. Being taken for granted, being spoken over, being the one whose feelings could be spent without cost because she never made anyone pay for spending them. And she absorbed each one and forgave each one instantly and left the door open for the next because she believed that closing it would make her someone she did not want to be. She had moments over the years when she felt the truth press against her, when a friend gently suggested she was giving too much, when a quiet voice inside her asked whether all this bleeding was really love. But she waved the moments away, because facing them would have meant changing, and changing felt like a betrayal of the person she had always been. So she stayed the same, and the years took their portion, and the moments of truth grew fewer, until she stopped noticing them at all. That is how it happens. Not by a single wrong turn, but by 1,000 small refusals to turn at all. Here is the part that should reach you. She was not unhappy in any way she could name. She would have told you her life was fine, that she was blessed, that she had no complaints. And that is exactly the tragedy, because the cost of a life of reachability is rarely a disaster you can point to. It is the quiet, permanent postponement of your own presence. It is decades of being fully occupied by other people and never once fully at home in yourself. It is arriving at the end and realizing you were never actually here, because you were always somewhere else, managing someone, earning someone, rehearsing someone, bleeding for someone who did not notice the blood. Look closely at what that postponement actually cost, because the sum of it is larger than any single day suggests. A morning given to reading someone's mood is a morning you will not get back. An evening spent rehearsing a phantom argument is an evening subtracted from your one life. String enough of them together and you have years, whole years, lived at a slight remove from your own existence, present for everyone but yourself. The reachable person is generous with everything except the thing that matters most, which is their own uninterrupted presence in their own uninterrupted life. And no one thanks them for the sacrifice, because no one ever asked for it. It was paid quietly into a fund that returns nothing. She found her calm eventually, and this is the mercy in it, because it is almost never too late. She found it in solitude, in the quiet after the kneading thinned out. She found that the retreat she had feared her whole life was not an ending, but the first room that had ever been entirely her own. She learned the pause, late, and marveled at the space in it. She learned to let moods be information, and the house grew lighter. She learned to hold her standards in silence, and the people who had counted on her endless availability drifted toward easier doors, and she did not chase a single one of them. She rose. in the only way that lasts, which is inward, where no one else can grant it or take it away. And here is what surprised her most in those late, quieter years. The calm did not make her love less, it made her love better. When she stopped bleeding for people, she found she had more to give, given freely now instead of extracted, offered from steadiness instead of scraped from a wound. The few relationships that survived her new stillness grew warmer, not colder, because warmth given by a whole person is worth more than warmth wrung from a depleted one. She had spent 40 years believing that her endurance was her gift to the world, and only at the end did she understand that her steadiness would have been the greater gift, if only she had let herself build it sooner. But she carried this regret to the end, and she said it plainly to anyone young enough to still change course. She said she wished she had learned it sooner, not because the late version was worse, but because the years she gave to being reachable were years she could not get back, and they were the best years, spent almost entirely in the weather of other people. Do not wait as long as she did. That is the whole warning, and it is enough. You do not have to become hard to become unreachable. This is the fear that keeps kind people reachable forever. The fear that composure is a kind of coldness, that boundaries are a kind of cruelty, that the person who cannot be hurt has stopped loving. It is the opposite. The hard people you have known were the most reachable of all. Brittle, defensive, exploding at the smallest touch, because hardness is just a thin shell over a wound that never learned to close. Real calm is not a shell. It is a depth. It does not flinch, not because it feels nothing, but because it is too deep to be disturbed by what happens on the surface. Grace is not the absence of feeling. Grace is feeling, fully, and remaining unmoved by hands that did not earn the right to move you. Hold on to the difference between the shell and the depth, because it is everything. A shell can be cracked, and the harder it is, the more spectacular the crack when it finally comes. But depth cannot be cracked, because there is nothing rigid in it to break. The person of real calm bends and absorbs and lets things pass through and remains, because their steadiness does not depend on holding anything tightly. This is resilience of the truest kind, not the resilience of a wall that resists until it shatters, but the resilience of deep water that receives every stone thrown into it and closes over the place without a mark. That is what you are building. Not armor, depth. So here is what you do before this day is over. 3 things, plain enough to carry into the next hour. The first thing, find the one conversation you have been rehearsing, the argument with the person who is not in the room, and end it. Say the words out loud if you are alone. This conversation is not happening, and I release it. Then notice how much of your mind comes back to you when you stop lending it to a ghost. Do this every time the rehearsal starts again today, and it will start again. And each time you set it down, you are training the deepest muscle you own. The second thing, the next time someone hands you a mood or a jab or a cool silence meant to make you scramble, do nothing for the length of one full breath, in and out all the way, before you respond to anything. In that single breath, you will feel yourself stop being a door and start being a person who decides. Whatever you choose after the breath, you will have chosen it, and that alone changes everything. The third thing, choose one standard, one small line you will no longer let be crossed, and enforce it today with your behavior and not your voice. Do not announce it. Do not warn anyone. Simply become, quietly, a person who no longer swings that particular way, and let the silence carry the message that no speech ever could. Do these 3 things and you have already begun. Not the loud way, with declarations and ultimatums that the world can argue with, but the quiet way, the lasting way, the way that builds a calm so deep that in time, and it will take time, nothing thrown at the surface will ever again reach the still water underneath. You have carried enough. Set some of it down. Then stand there in your own presence, in your own peace, unreachable at last, and see how much of your life comes home to you.